Oh, yeah. Um, and as I was saying, that there are techniques that we can use to develop our capacity for being lucid in the dream state. And for example, one of them is simply to try to reduce the disparity between the sleep state and the daytime state. So when we sleep at night and we're dreaming, then we're in another world. Essentially, we think we're in our current lifetime. In other words, we're fully identified with the dream. So whatever is happening, we think is real. But then when we wake up, we realize that it was just a dream. And then for most of us, we forget what we dreamt very quickly. And that's because the dream state and the daytime state are very disparate. But what we want to do is make a connection between the dream state and the daytime state. And so we can do that by blurring the boundaries a little bit. And so we can, for example, pretend using our imagination. We can pretend that when we're doing certain activities during the daytime, that actually we're doing them while we're dreaming. So if I pick up this water bottle and I take a drink, and I imagine that I'm drinking this water in my dream. So that's creating this kind of blurring the boundaries of this nighttime experience that we have and the daytime experience. And if we do that on a regular basis, then we can begin to now both remember our dreams more regularly, and also we can begin, the habit of saying to ourselves, I'm dreaming now and I'm doing this in my dream, will follow us into the dream state. And at a certain point, we're going to realize that we're actually dreaming. So another technique, which is kind of well known because it was popularized by some shamanic, Carlos Castaneda popularized this technique. And then more recently, my friend and colleague, Robert Waggoner, who's a very prolific lucid dreamer, he used this technique also. But the technique is to find your hands in a dream. And what we mean by that is that we want to realize that we're dreaming about our hands. So during the daytime, we might many times put our hands in front of our face or look at them and focus on them and say to ourselves, tonight I'm going to dream about my hands. And when I do, I'm going to become lucid. So those people who have used this technique successfully might find, and this is a true account, is that they might find that suddenly in one of their dreams, hands come up in front of their face and they realize they're dreaming. And when you have the experience of realizing you're dreaming, which is different than being totally identified with the dream, suddenly everything changes. So this is a very important moment, is the recognition that we're actually in a dream. And being in a dream and being lucid is quite similar to being awake, except that our physical body is still inert. The tetany of the muscles, the paralysis of the muscles is intact, but the mind now is awake and realizing that it's in the dream state. And now the next thing would be to try to perhaps do some sort of activities in the dream state that would be useful.
So as part of our dream yoga training, we can use kind of the power of our imagination and be working with our imaginations. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That's a very important part of dream yoga training. And Rinpoche says that the activities of the day are going to be the support for your activities of the night. So in many different ways, I just mentioned a couple of them. During the daytime, we can be doing things that are going to lend themselves towards our development of our nighttime practice. So, yes, we use our imagination, our fantasy, if you will, to develop ourselves.
And I think that that kind of power of our imagination or fantasy is something that is employed in many different types of meditation practice and different spiritual techniques. There always seems to be a correlation between our imaginative power of our mind and certain techniques that are considered spiritual practice.
Yeah. For example, in Jungian dream work, there was a process called active imagination, where we use our imagination and fantasy to then develop our capacity for creativity and many other things as well. But yes, you're right. It's just very pervasive in many cultures that these activities exist.
And so when you mentioned that technique about finding your hands, then that's kind of, it reminds me of the concept of kind of having a suggestion or an anchor. That this is something that's prevalent, for example, in hypnosis and hypnotherapy, having a specific kind of motion or kind of small activity that you habitually do, and then that can become an anchor to trigger you to have a positive therapeutic effect if you want to work on something with your mind. So do you think that in dream yoga we use different types of these sort of psychological anchors or triggers? Is that kind of a thing?
That is a thing. And so when we say there are different techniques, so that those types of things, those triggers are part of it. Suggestion, self-suggestion, these are part of it. In order for people to do things in a more disciplined way, like what we said before, to imagine that you're doing things in a dream. I'm drinking water in a dream. Or to just remind ourselves that this could be a dream right now. I used to say to my students, okay, go out and do that 30 times. And then tomorrow we'll talk about your experience. And then maybe I would ask them the next day, what was your experience when you did that? And everybody would be looking away from me and avoiding my eyes and so on. And I realized that it's hard to develop that kind of discipline of doing something like that 30 times in a day. So we used began to use this app called Mind Jogger. One of a number of apps that exist that send you a chime or a message that, to remind you to do something during the day on a random basis. So now if I have my Mind Jogger app going, it will chime and then I'll remember, oh, I'm in a dream, or now the next thing I do, I'm going to say to myself, this is reading this book in a dream. And it's going to follow me, that habit. So that's been very useful to develop a discipline. Rinpoche, Chogyal Namkhai Norbu, in the early days, he used to say, okay, all of you people who are addicted to cigarette smoking, every time you have the habit of wanting a cigarette, you should remember to do something like this. So you could integrate your practice with your addiction in that case.
Right. So now we could do that with every time we dive for our social media or our other phone.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. To put a little reminder on your iPhone saying, okay, when I check my phone, I'm going to also ask myself, am I dreaming right now? Or something like that.